Hello and welcome to Starcast. I'm Heather Rowan Robbins, and I want to talk to you about the astrology of the moment, the astrology of important people in the news at the moment, and give you some place to take this. I'm going to wait one more minute so we start at 1 o'clock. But I'd like to talk about, I want us to think while we're getting started about how we want to see our country in the future, to take a moment and imagine the world you want to live in, the sense of fairness, equity, order, the beauty, the creativity, the rights that you want, because we can't create a negative. One of the rules of hypnotherapy and politics is you can't say, don't think of a pink elephant, you will always think of a pink elephant. You can't say, don't do something. You have to hold your vision. You need to plant your garden with care and love. And in that garden, weed whatever's in your way rather than focus on the weeds. And as someone with enough Virgo in their chart to sink a battleship, which I do, I can tell you this is true. You need to focus on what you want and deal with what you don't want. This is going to be increasingly important this political year, and we'll talk about why. But first, let's talk about today, which is the new year of the year of the snake. And I'm going to see if I can add this. There we go. This morning, we had the new moon in Aquarius, which is always the new moon for in Chinese astrology. And we've moved from the year of the dragon, which is all about fire and drama, and it was last year, into the year of the snake, which is both some deep poison, but it's also the slithering connection to the earth. The snake always feels what's going on. Now, this can be good in the fact that we have the sensitivity to feel what's going on. Things won't happen behind our awareness, but it can raise our anxiety level with the year of the snake. We just want to keep it focused on where we want to go. And the snake also talks about how to transmute poison and move beyond it. The sun is very active still. It is still said we haven't had good aurora in a while, but it's still shooting off major solar flares, which keeps that volume turned up on history and all of our personal and political excitement. So just notice there's a lot of volume to the aspects, that there's a lot of a pool of energy that we can direct. And it's being directed now to create chaos, but we can focus it on where we want to go. But this morning, it's an interesting, some people begin the new year at in the springtime. I honor the first day of the summer, the spring equinox. The first day of Aries is my new year. The first day of the new month after the winter solstice in America and the West, we honor Capricorn, which is structures and business and security and systems, is how they begin the new year and making resolutions for the new year. And in China, it's about the collective, when the sun and the moon come back to Aquarius, and how do we all work together? That's going to be key this year, as Pluto has just moved into Aquarius for a long time, for well over a decade. And in that time, Pluto takes whatever we're experiencing through that sign, takes that to the edge, to the edge of death, to rebirth. And what is Pluto? Pluto is just leaving Capricorn, where it took structures and patriarchy and systems and traditions all the way to the edge. And hopefully we learn from its extremes. We saw a real rash of dictators under Pluto and Capricorn. Pluto has just gone into Aquarius. Astrologers have been talking about that for hours. And hello, Renee. I hope hello to anybody out there. And that with that process of Pluto in Aquarius, it talks about how do we work with this many people on Earth? How do we work in the collective? Pluto in Aquarius is the heart of DEI. It is about diversity, inclusion, and equity because that's what's going to help us get through. But first, it takes whatever it wants to bring forward to the edge. So that's being challenged here in America, and all the people that I know, including my mate, who work in DEI work to really open up that, to create a truly healthy, diverse system, because we see from ecology that diverse systems are much more resilient and they're better at problem solving and they can come up with new answers and they solve things. So how can we make our human interactions mirror that? That's going to become essential. First, it's being challenged. But that Pluto in Aquarius also gives us the answer to it. How do we work together? This new moon in Aquarius this morning was at 9 degrees of Aquarius. We saw some interesting patterns over this last week to let us know about this work. Now, I've noticed that when the outer planets change signs, and this year we're going from for last year, this year, and next year, most of the outer planets have switched from, or are in the process of switching from yin introverted signs, the water and earth signs, to action oriented air and fire signs, the yang signs. Now, we're going to see this switch all across the board, but every time one of the personal planets, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, hits that planet for the first time, we see new information. It helps us understand the meaning of those planets out there and their changes into this new ecosystem. Last year, Pluto went into Aquarius for a while, backed off, and went back into Capricorn for the election. So the election felt like it's gone back into history. And then entered Aquarius this January 5th, 6th, and will be in there for over a decade. But the sun conjunct, last time the sun did not conjunct Pluto because the sun was already past that point when Pluto entered Aquarius. This time it entered exactly on inauguration date. The Sun-Pluto conjunction, how do we illuminate what are the power dynamics of our world? What are our Pluto? What takes us to the edge of death and rebirth? What do we need this for? Is an extreme place, and it is cooking, and it helped us. It's written into the chart of this presidency, and we got to see those power dynamics kick in immediately. It's interesting that one of the first things that was done in this administration was to cut off funding to research, to the CDC, to health industries, to research in health in other countries. And all the virologists have said, we have Ebola, Marburg, bird flu, all these plutonian germ base, erupting and bubbling. When we go to help them, we minimize that, we contain it, and we keep ourselves healthy as a country. When we don't help it, we no longer have an eye on that, we're not helping them contain it. How will Pluto speak to us through these problems? The other major planet shifting. So anyway, back to that. Pluto conjunct the sun on the election day. And we knew that the next echo was going to be yesterday and today as Mercury conjunct Pluto and gave voice to the intentions of what's really going on. And we saw all these projects slashed yesterday, all the funding cut and put on hold. And then by nightfall, it was turned around because it was highly illegal for them to do that. But the idea is to create chaos. And we'll talk about Trump's chart and what a good chaos producer he is. But it's to notice that we're in this tension place. Now, when I see this, we have the new moon is dealing with the sun and the moon have just gone past Mercury and Pluto. They've all just dealt with it, talking about this in the world ahead. But we see Venus coming to conjunct Neptune this weekend, a belief that things can be different. Neptune, this is the last conjunction with Venus and Neptune before Neptune heads into Aries. So it's going back and forth over it because Venus is about to retrograde. But in that point, it's saying, what do we love? What have we loved over the last decade and a bit, 12 years that Neptune's been in Pisces? Do we honor that process that says we do have compassion? We feel if the change in legislation doesn't hit us directly, who do we know it does affect? How does it affect? How does our empathy remind us? One of the gifts that Neptune in Pisces has given us for this last decade is to remind us of our permeability, our financial permeability, the permeability of our borders, the permeability of our immune system, because we notice that if there are diseases in a third world country, they will be here soon. There is no boundary. We are semi-permeable membranes. So when we take care of the health of the world, we take care of our health also. Our psyche, our intuition, our connection is so strong in that pattern. How do we work together to feel that process? Now, Neptune's also given us the right to vision and the right to imagine. Neptune always can bring that in. Remember, Neptune's positive side is spirituality, imagination, feeling at one with the world, collective energy, that joy you get when you're around people with some of the same energy as you, the buzz at a football game, the buzz at a spiritual gathering, that collective energy, and the collective panic when things go wrong. But that we have this shared energy field. Positive Neptune is our connection to our muse and to the one and to spirituality. Neptune goes into practical. Neptune is water, liquid, oils. While Neptune's been in Pisces, we have the movement of honoring water as sacred, that water is life. Water is sacred. The water walkers have walked us through that and reminded us that if we don't take care of our water, we don't have life. And how can we honor that for all peoples and all parts of the ecosystem? Neptune, and not just because of some theoretical altruism, though that's beautiful, but because it's real. But Neptune also Pisces, in that imagination, we can get lost in our own belief systems. And the idea of what is truth has become really malleable. We see that in our politicians who think they're speaking the truth and are not, or think they're speaking the truth. We see that in any attack. We have to look at ourselves. Where do we get so attached to a dream, an ideal, a perspective, a fear that we can't see clearly? That's the camouflaging part of Neptune. Neptune also points out to our addictions. It's what are we stuck on? Our addiction to fossil fuel. It can be anything that allows us to escape from the tough realities and only look at something temporary, the temporary high of using up all of our fossil fuels, for instance. But it could also be alcohol and drugs and martyrdom. So that's Neptune's continuum. Neptune's been in Pisces. It has been idealizing the evangelical movement has been strong during this time, but so has many other spiritual process. It started to blend over into politics, and that's where we run into danger. But we also see that it's been attached to wanting to believe in something. Now, Neptune then is heading into Aries this spring. It will enter Aries on the last day of March. It spends the summer in Aries, then it goes back in the fall to Pisces briefly, and then heads back into Aries. Now, the last time, our belief system goes from this receptive, imaginative, let's create our own reality, to something very action-oriented, very intense, very focused. Check where you have 0 degrees of Aries in your chart, or check with me or any other astrologer. Where do you have that? Because that's going to be a hot spot for you in the next 2 years. Um, the second time Neptune heads into Aries in 2026, it's going to be conjunct Saturn, and it's going to be making things happen. Now, the last time, Neptune has a very slow cycle. The last time it entered Aries was in 1861, on the first battle of the Civil War happened on one day. Neptune changed signs on the second day, and on the third day, the day after Neptune went into Aries, President Lincoln declared the Civil War. Now, one of the fears that's going on now with our chaos creator is that what we're being asked to do is get so upset that, throwing out, canceling all this money out, canceling Meals on Wheels, and then rescinding it, is designed to create civil unrest. Because if we create a civil war and we go into the streets, martial law gets enacted. And we need to do this through the Pluto and Aquarius. We need to do this through group action, working together, work on the system, taking our outrage and being specific. But I think it's really important, again, find people who are upset about the same thing you are. Chunk it down, focus on what calls you, because we need people in all corners of this to work towards a better vision. I'm going to add this to when we're going to make this whole bigger. This is the chart of America. And what we see in the center is our natal chart. Then we see progressions and the planets where they are now, the transits on the outer ring. What you'll notice about this, we've talked about the American natal chart often. I use the Sibley chart because every major event I have noticed, particularly 9/11, hit this chart, like rang it like a bell. So there may be other charts that work for other parts of of America, because we're not just one birth. It's a real hologram, but this one can work as a trigger for events. Now, 2 months ago, right after the election, our progressed moon, we went through a progressed lunar new moon about a year ago, and we began a new 30-year cycle. We began that new 30-year cycle in Pisces at the bottom of the chart, which says to me it's going to take us a while before we get our power back in the world, that we're backing off the preeminence on the world stage, where we have to do some introspection and get our ship in order first. But the progressed moon went into Aries 2 months ago, and it went from that complexity of feeling and thoughts and ideas and how do we fix things in depth into Aries, just blunderbuss action. And it's going to be in Aries for the next 28 months. And then it moves into Taurus, kind of be more settled, and it will be about recreating, security in our country. But right now, watch the mood be Aries, action, blunderbuss. On a good day, I had hoped that we could take this action energy, because I saw this coming, but my hope was that it would take us out of our complacency and let everybody unite together to deal with climate change. And that's still a possibility for the rest of the world as Neptune goes into Aries, instead of more war. But that Aries energy can be a hero if it's got something to act on. But how do we act? So I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to check here also, and I'm going to come back on so you can also see me here in the corner, that this is Donald Trump's chart, and these are the planets on the outside, his progressions, and then the transits. Now, what's one of the interesting things, there's 2 times we have for Donald Trump. One is at 9:51 and one's 10:54. Now, the 10:54 one that says that he was born just as Mars was rising, and that certainly fits him. So that's the one I'm using. It's also the one, when we look at the astrocartography of the country and we see where his lines hit, it puts Mars on the ascendant exactly over DC or within, 10 miles of DC. And that says he moves more into his Mars energy when he's in DC, because that's how astrocartography works. You move as you hit places where the planets are rising, setting directly above or directly below. At the time you were born, you front load those energy fields. It's very like the tent pegs that tack you into Earth and engage your action. Now we see with him, 9 months ago, his progressed moon went into Scorpio. Now, I thought there was a good chance that he wouldn't step back on the stage because his progressed moon's going through the bottom of the chart. Kamala's was headed down there also. That worried me. But his progressed moon's going through the bottom of the chart. And the progressed moon at the bottom of the chart usually means you're supposed to be doing your homework. Doesn't mean you don't have work in the world, but the pot on the front burner is your personal work, not your work out there in the world. He's deep in his personal crap. That moon in Scorpio, it wants retribution. It wants to focus. It's great if you're writing a book. It's great if you're working on doing personal therapy. It's great if you're investigating a gold mine, but it is not great for seeing what the world needs, for having broad vision. You're seeing what it's time for you to do your own work and your personal agenda. Unfortunately, his personal agenda is being splattered around the world. Now, he has a Leo rising with Mars in Leo on the ascendant. That's that bravado. Uranus, the planet of, when we think of chaos, we look at him, Mr. Chaos here, we think of that chaos that he's producing. All the planets in the world, in our solar system spin in one direction, except Venus, which spins very slowly backwards. Uranus spins backwards and sideways. It spins very, technically it's close to that. It spins at an angle, and it creates a bizarre electrical field, and it spins very fast. So it tends to act like that clutch and shift gears, and want to be all about the shifting of gears, not necessarily what we want to settle into. It was named after the god of primordial chaos, and the primordial chaos has a purpose. It says we're going to take you back into the soup and reconfigure things. And we think of some of the most chaotic moments of our life where we are thrown hardballs and everything falls apart. We can choose to step into the higher note of that and reinvent our life in a good way. Or we can just be chaos and spread the chaos. Uranus is sitting right on his midheaven, right on the flagpole at the top of the chart right now. It is saying, it is enacting. He came in here, thought his mandate was to create change, but it looks more like he's spreading chaos. That Uranus squares his ascendant and squares his Mars. Uranus squares your Mars, your temperament is all over the place. It's going to be there. Uranus also leaves Taurus. It's in Taurus now, changing the organic world. It's going to go into Gemini, and I think that will continue what we're seeing in the AI world, but I'll come back to that. And it's going to come back into Taurus and go back and forth over that for the next 9 months. Now, Pluto in Aquarius as it dipped in, we really began to see AI become part of everyday life. Whether you like it or not, trying to get past the AI to get your information on the internet can be tricky, and let alone the flood of AI photo pictures. So we've got AI flooding in. As Pluto conjunct Mercury yesterday, kind of like a transforming information. And we saw it in America with all those pronouncements of, budget cuts and funding freezes. It was also announced that China has come out with a much cheaper to produce form of AI, and that and it's open source, so it will be free to everybody, which undercut both Trump and Elon Musk, who have invested heavily in controlling the AI. And AI is only as good as its programmers. So it's going to be interesting how that works. An interesting piece of AI that gives me a little bit of hope in this is that if we can program it with objectivity and not continue to program our biases into it, and that we have to really watch for because we saw that at first in the medical system. Now they say AI programs have a much higher rate of diagnosis than doctors do, of correct diagnosis. They don't know what to do, they may not ask the right questions, but they have a 90+%, whereas doctors average in the 70s, even with the best doctors, in the 70% accurate diagnosis. Always question if it doesn't feel right. Why? Is because they suspect that the AI programs do not have built in the prejudice that, oh, you're a woman, that can't be your problem, or you're young, that can't be your problem, or whatever, that can't be your problem, and really look at the details. Is this something that can be helpful in other parts of our life? That's going to be interesting to see. But it will be Pluto, a Chat GPT, and other Pluto and Aquarius AI programs so they scraped information from all these other sources and they said, oh, that doesn't violate your copyright. You don't have any copyright over that. This is all my information now. And then this new Chinese source scraped it all from Chat GPT, and they're screaming copyrights now, which they've already set themselves up to not have. So it's going to be an interesting process. We have Mercury, Pluto. It's going to be talking about how do we go through this process of changing how we go through the process of changing what the power dynamics are around communication and thought process. So that's going to be an interesting person. The other piece that we've been looking at, the other troublemaker in this mix, that takes us straight to Elon Musk. Elon Musk's chart, again, you look at him and he has a strong Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Now, his chart is really insecure. He's a Cancer rising, Moon in Virgo. He isn't, his chart looks like he's always trying to prove something. And who is he trying to prove it to? The planet highest in his chart is his Saturn in Gemini, and it directly opposes his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Now, he has Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions, which can be intuition, spirituality, it can be blood sugar issues, but it can also mean addictions. And he's mentioned, if you go to Wikipedia, it's mentioned that he says he takes ketamine every other week for his depression. He is doing a fair amount of drugs. He was caught smoking weed on camera once, so that because one of his SpaceX had a government contract, he had to be blood tested for a while for that. It's that, when you see him acting out on stage, woo, this is someone who's whose reality isn't so grounded, is not here. But that Jupiter-Neptune, that illusion, that imagination, that ability to kind of get lost in an image, which is how he created some visionary things, supposedly, or he didn't create them, he backed the people who created them, but also that he can get lost in his fantasy world. That conjunction opposes his Saturn. And what it looks to me, and he's mentioned that his father is a true sociopath. His father and this is again all public info, has admitted to killing a few people and has said that, Elon said his father was the worst person, probably, has done everything bad that they could be. He had a father to child by his stepdaughter. He's a charmer. That he lied. He had under the table emerald mines, which is how he had money to pass on to Elon. Now, that Elon grew up in a very warped sense. Probably the man sounds sociopathic, but I'm not going to diagnose it, but a very warped sense of morality. And I don't see any signs. I see that Saturn opposed that Jupiter-Neptune pulsing, being set off recently, and see that he's really acting out, trying to prove himself to someone he says he doesn't like, but still is his defining person. He's in the very end of a progressed lunar cycle, so he's kind of living out the highest stuff on his progressed sun and moon are both in Leo. So that's him jumping up on stage and loving the spotlight. His progressed his progressed sun goes into Virgo in 3 years. His progressed moon leaves Leo in 5 months, and we may see him calm down and step back. But in the meantime, notice how much of this is ego-driven and not health-driven. The other piece I wanted to switch to is the American Constitution, is our vision statement. And I'm going to come back to the idea that we are here, that our vision statement, if you come down to it and you take that language and put it, all people, not all men, but all people are created equal. And we take it in from there. The Constitution is a powerful vision statement, and it's something that both sides have agreed to and are working with. And it may not be everything that we want on this side, but certainly not everything they want on that side. It can hold us into the core and move forward. America just went through its Pluto return. It went through where Pluto came back to where it was when was born. I said Pluto pushes us to the edge. It pushed us to the edge. That happened right around January 6th and it was the first time Pluto had been back there since America was born. The next Pluto, this is looking at the Constitution, signed in at September 17th, 1787. I went for noon or 1 o'clock. Don't go by the houses on this because we don't have a time for the signing. Or if you do, please send it to me. But we do have the aspects, and we do have the placements. We do know that Pluto was at 14 degrees of Aquarius, where it will be in several years from now. Not that long, but several years from now. So between now and through the next 5 years, we're going to see our Constitution be tested, and it needs to come back to its power, and it will become even stronger if we can hold it in place and in the direction and keep calling ourselves back to that. So I'm going to close in a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about this week and what's going on, but I want you to think back while looking with all of these aspects. How can you imagine taking keeping that vision in your mind with all the crazy stuff that's going to be going down? Don't take the bait each time. Know that chaos is the purpose from what we've seen. Come back to what is your vision for the country, who shares that vision, and how can you work with them to create a vision of a better America. That this is not the time to call it, what am I against, as much it is, what am I for, and how can I move that when Saturn and Neptune head into Aries. There's going to be a lot of power behind our direction. It can drive that train, but if our train doesn't know where the track is, it won't help us. But it can be great power for direction with a clear piece. Think of that politically, but also think of that personally. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be going? How do you want to take this? What do you want to use this momentum to produce in your life? And don't let the chaos, stay aware of it, keep dealing with it, but focus on what you want to grow. Weed the garden, but focus on what you're trying to grow. So the moon is new in Aquarius today. It's going to go into Pisces on Friday and Saturday. And that moon in Pisces may leave us feeling easily overwhelmed. Check in with the people that you know and love. And just make sure that all the people that have had their nerves fried this week, all the people involved in equity work, all the people with a government fund, all the trans, non-binary, non-queer people, give them some love and support and connection, because we're going to feel it all, this quivering, even if the funding came back, we're quivering, at what's been going through with the moon in Pisces. The moon goes into Aries on Sunday. You'll see it kick in on Monday, more on Monday and Tuesday, where there's some action kicking in. I think you'll see a lot of, and now what are the next steps? And how can we grow a new patch of leaders, because it's hard to find them at the moment, and that have vision and purpose and articulation to take us into this next place. And then you'll see on, middle of the week, next week, kind of stabilizing, steadiness, and a chance for us to come back into our bodies and back into our experience. Thank you. And I want to remind you that my book, Starcodes, is all about using choice-based astrology. How do we take these symbols that we deal with in our natal charts and in our work and use it to connect to possibilities? We can see where the danger is. We can see what the practicalization. What's the higher element in this that we can redirect towards? Because the cure is usually found in another expression of the same aspects that are giving us a hard time. I wish you all peace, love, care, and hope in this next phase. Stay tuned. I'm going to be starting a regular podcast, and Access Astrology is moving on to YouTube and Facebook. And I wish you well. Take care.